Okay. Hey guys, so today I am here with Brad Federman, who is a keynote speaker and author. He is also the CEO and founder of PerformancePoint LLC. He has dedicated his career to speaking with individuals and organizations to help unlock their potential. So, how are you doing today, Brad?
Doing really well. Glad to be
Good.
here. Thank you for having me.
Yes, I'm so excited to meet you. So would you like to tell us about a little bit of your story and how you got started in your career and what also inspired you too?
Can I start with the inspiration?
Sure, yeah, whatever you want to do.
Sure. The inspiration was my dad.
Mhm.
When he was a young boy, probably about 9 or 10, he wrote the mayor of New York, Mayor LaGuardia, a letter basically saying it's not fair for some kids to have certain experiences and other kids not to. And he did it in a very profound way. And he wasn't asking anybody to change his lot in life. He was asking for opportunities for kids' eyes to be open to the rest of the world, basically. They knew so they would know what was possible. And Mayor LaGuardia actually visited him at his apartment, knocked on their door, sat down with his mom, dad, and him and his family, and then sent my dad to summer camp for a week of sleepaway summer camp because that was one of the experiences. And it was because he wanted kids of all backgrounds, wealthy, poor, different ethnicities, to come together and see each other's people, right? And learn from one another and learn about what other people's lives were like, to see what the world was like, right? That was really what my dad was speaking to. At the end of the week, the mayor came to visit my dad and said, "How was your week?" And my dad said it was the best week of his life. So the mayor turned to the camp director and said, "Give him one more week." And my dad said, "No." And LaGuardia looked at him puzzled. So did the director, and said, "What do you mean no? You just said it was the best time of your life." And he said, "I told you it wasn't fair for some kids to have an experience and other kids not to. If you have another week to give it to another kid." And that stuck with me. I never ever heard that story from anyone. Well, from my dad. I only heard it from like his siblings. He would never tell me that story. But he spent his whole life focusing on helping people see what was possible. And that's kind of where my inspiration came from. That's the first place where I got it, was how do you actually get people to see what their full potential is? And then as I got older, I searched out opportunities where I could do that. I worked with the leadership camp. I did different things as a teenager and as a college student. And then I started saying, how do I do this in real life? And so I studied organizational communication, human resources, and I started working internally at companies like Humana, focusing on things like organizational development. And I finally got to the point where I said I want to do this myself. So I started my own company, and we focus on creating cultures that are strong, that help both the organization and the individual thrive. We create better leaders so that they are working with their employees in a more beneficial way. We create more engaged employees, a better work environment. And we work with companies on how to create better relationships with their customers so they have more loyalty with their customers and they have more connectivity with their customers. And so really, I have dedicated my time, whether it's through speaking, coaching, and so is the team I work with, training, consulting, to better people's lives and work lives.
That's a really amazing story. Also too to mention, yeah, about your dad and how he was the inspiration for you to start. And I also kind of like following up on that. Is there like a success story that you're really proud of? You don't have to name like anybody if you just want to keep it private. I noticed that you on your website you mentioned some big companies that you worked with, like a success story that you're really proud of, like with working with.
There was a high tech company out in the West Coast
Mhm.
that we worked with. We were brought in because they wanted to improve the environment. They wanted to improve the employee engagement. When we sat down and we actually did the work with them, we realized how bad it was. Uh, they they were the people who worked for that company were angry, almost hostile, right? And it's probably one of the only times when I went and worked somewhere where I felt I was in focus groups and I felt uncomfortable. I felt like I was unsafe, right? And I had to kind of
Mhm.
convince them I'm a third party. I'm not part of the company. I'm here to help, right? I'm here for you all. And, when they finally opened up, it became clear why. They had a wonderful culture that was all over the walls, posters, placards on desks, everything, you name it. And when you read it, you were impressed. I mean, you loved it. It sounded great. Problem was, it wasn't being lived every day. One of the cultural values was about respect, and the problem was that it wasn't uncommon to see things like a senior leader berate, put down, be sarcastic,
Mhm.
cruel, or mean to an employee, even in public, even in front of their peers. And so there became this massive distrust and anger, and what I became more aware of was that employees, in a lot of ways, were sabotaging the success of this company. And so I actually had to sit down with the senior leadership team and work with them because they didn't think they were the problem. They thought the problem lied elsewhere in the company. And and it was a tough, tough first meeting, but I made progress. I finally had somebody open up about why they thought employees might feel the way they did. That led another leader, I should say, executive, to open up. And then the CEO kind of put his fist on the table and said, "We have work to do." And we worked with them, and we did several things, but one of the biggest things we did was we actually created a three strike you rule out. So the values are not there. They weren't there and they're not there ever to be optional, and they're not there for the good times. They're there for the tough moments, right? That's when they count. It's easy to show respect when everything's going smoothly. It's hard to show respect when the world's falling apart, right? And so we did a three strike rule, you're out. The first time that you demonstrated a lack of respect for a fellow employee, you got a training plan. Second time, you got a coach. And the third time, you got shown the door. And this was specifically for senior leaders. And it took one person to test the waters, took about 3 months, and then they lost their job. And everybody knew, all the senior leaders knew the CEO was serious about it. And every employee knew that the world had just changed. And one of the things that's really cool is they were losing money when we first started working with them. They were losing over $1 million. Within 1 year, we were able to help them shift that to a $10 million profit. They had an $11 million shift to the positive. I mean, it just, people are amazing things. They can help you run a business, or they can help you destroy a business. And that's why I love working with people, because process is easy. Technology is actually pretty straightforward. It's getting people to adopt it that's hard. It's getting people to work together that's difficult. And no matter what type of business you're in and what you do, people are connected to it and they're touching something in it, and it makes a difference.
Yeah, and especially too with the relationship between like a big corporation and then the workers, it can be very yeah, misleading, and then one party thinks they're right and like you were talking about, and one's stubborn. So it's really amazing how you're able to kind of like literally just be like the, almost like the referee, like, hey, like I know what to do. Listen to me. Or yeah, kind of just trying to keep the peace and here and there. So that is amazing too, because you're able to not only to see the human side, but also the business side. So you're bringing both together. So that was my other question too. What do you think is so important for leaders and employees or whatever it is to have a relationship like that makes sense to in their relationship to have? Like, obviously it's respect, but what are other things that you think are so crucial?
I think that I think there are three things.
Hmm.
Leaders have to recognize that the tasks are easy and the people are hard. We have a tendency to think the tasks are hard and the people are easy. And so we go into meetings and we focus on process and tools and postmortems where we talk about what went wrong.
Hmm.
But the truth is that when you dig deep enough, you find out that all of those things are caused by people, right? So I go and talk to companies, and they'll tell me we're having trouble with the things that keep up at night are morale, turnover. So then I say, what do you talk about in your meetings? And they say, oh, this project, this technology, this restructuring. Well, hold on. What about all the things that you said keep you up at night that drive you crazy? They were all people oriented. You're not talking about them in your meetings. Why? Well, I didn't go to school for that. It's unpredictable, right? And so if you ever really want to fix what's happening in your company, you can't avoid the real issues, right? So I think it's about placing people at the right priority. The second thing I would say is there are three things that I would tell leaders that they have to focus on. One is they have to lose the ego. It is not about them,
Yeah.
right? They are a servant really to their folks. Their job is to remove barriers, to grow people, to coach people. So lose the ego. That's the first thing. I always say leaders talk last because you should build off of the ideas that your people bring to the table, right? So that's the first thing. Second thing I would say is empathy. You really have to understand where your people are coming from. I worked with one company, very large Fortune 500 company, and they thought their people were entitled. They wanted 8-hour shifts instead of 4-hour shifts. They were asking for different things, and what it boiled down to was the company had cut their hours, made them part-time, removed benefits, and now we're scheduling them in 4-hour increments instead of 8-hour increments. And many people couldn't afford the gas because it cost so much to drive there and drive back. They lived 40 minutes away from the location. And then they were being asked to work at a food bank, not work, excuse me, give money to a food bank, which over 50% of their people had to use to be able to eat because they weren't paid enough. And that was insult to injury, right? You had one person was shooting squirrels in order to eat. Another person was living out of their car. They had a woman who had forgone cancer treatment because she couldn't afford it, and she was working and knowing that she was going to die. And these leaders had no concept of what was going on. And when I had them, actually had them each all go to different people and ask them questions that were not business related, personal questions. Get to know your employees. And they came back and said, "Oh my God, we employ the working poor." And I said, "You knew that already." They said, "Yeah, but we knew it, but we didn't know." They knew it intellectually. They didn't know it in their hearts. When they got done, they realized these people aren't entitled. They're having such difficult moments in their life, and we're adding to that difficulty. And they started shifting the way they worked with their employees to make their lives easier. So connect, and don't just connect with empathy, right? That's the
Yeah.
key. That's the second thing. And then the last thing I would say is recognize that you control nothing. Leaders think they control things. You don't control anything except for one thing in your life, and that's your choices. You don't control people. You don't control process. You don't control outcomes. You don't control the market. You control nothing. The only thing you control are your choices. And make sure you're making good choices. Because if you think you control things, I'll tell you what, when you try and control people, let me define that for you. Control in that manner is basically fear in action. You're trying to control people because you're afraid something else will happen. You're afraid of what will happen. You want to make sure that only the certain things happen that you want to happen, and you don't like the lack of predictability. And the truth is, you can't force things. You can facilitate, and you can facilitate by making great choices. And those great choices have to be about letting a little bit go, connecting well with your employees, having empathy, right? Building that trust. That's what you got to do. So,
Wow, that's something that what you just said is also can apply to. I've heard that a lot, that you can only control yourself, not other people or what they do, their actions or anything, which is a great thing to live by. So I noticed that you have a couple of books, especially your latest book, Cultivating People, 101 Ways to Foster Engagement in 15 Minutes or Less. I can see it right there in your
that's right.
camera.
Yeah.
Yeah. Would you tell us a little bit more about that, about your book, what type of advice you have?
Sure. So it's called Cultivating Culture, 101 Ways to foster engagement in 15 minutes or less. And essentially what it is, it's 101 activities that you can do with your team that last between 5 and 15 minutes. Very, very fast. We call them huddles. We call them culture workouts. They're basically things that you can insert into any meeting you have with your team to make your team function better and to create the kind of culture you want. It gets people to think about cooperation and collaboration, trust, the way you want to service your customers. And what you end up doing is you create a common language, a common set of standards, shared norms, values that drive a more efficient and effective way to work together and to meet your customer needs. And it's actually a book to use rather than read. It really is 101 activities that you can take and use. So if you're looking for a nice theoretical esoteric book on culture, it is not the book for you. It is truly a practical book for a supervisor or manager to use in their meetings. They can pick one activity at a time and they can build the team that they desire and need and want. So that's what it is.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah. And also too, like, my last question is, do you have any upcoming projects you want to announce to anyone who may be hearing this?
Wow.
Anything exciting news or anything you want to share?
Well, we came out with a culture system. You see this box right here, so I'll pull it up
Yeah.
here.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
and and inside is a lot of stuff, but essentially the culture system, we actually help companies define their culture, and we do it with their customers in mind and their employees in mind. So it really is the best of all worlds. We then audit their employee touch points, the talent management system. We also audit their customer connections, touch points, and we give them advice on how they can tweak the company to support the culture that they know will lead to their growth, right? That they see as valuable. And then once they've done that, we actually have training. We actually have cultivating culture training, which actually helps their employees understand what culture is, why it's important, what a healthy, successful culture looks like, and how they can help build it. And we have it in e-learning. We have a train the trainer. We'll do in-house training. And we also have culture workouts or huddles that we customize for companies around their cultural values and behaviors, as well as what we call culture conversation starters. Those are really quick conversations that people can have about culture. And we have an AI culture system that hooks onto your meetings for like Teams, Zoom, Google Meet,
Uh-huh.
and will actually input into the system your specific cultural attributes. And what's
Oh,
really cool is it watches your meetings and then it gives you advice and feedback on how well you are building a culture that allows both the individual and the company to thrive. And it'll take your specific behaviors and values. Like we have a behavior like that's called collaborative, right? That's one of the
uh-huh.
values that we have. It'll look and see how collaborative people are being, and it'll give you feedback on where you did, where you didn't, and how you can become more collaborative, right? But it'll take yours and it'll give you feedback on your culture. It's a full-fledged
Oh,
system.
wow.
Nobody out there has something like this. It's just
Uh-huh.
great. So we're excited about that. And I'm finishing up, in fact, probably tonight, I'm finishing up the manuscript for my next book. And I'm
Oh,
excited about that. It'll come out in about June or July. So I'm really excited about that.
wow.
And it's a cool book. I'm excited about it. I put
Yeah.
massive amount of energy and work into it, research. And we are redefining the way people think about growth and delegation. It's called Never Delegate Again because the
Oh,
way
wow.
people delegate today is damaging and not productive. And we want to show you a productive way to grow your people and have them take on more responsibility.
Yeah, and actually, I'll ask one more question about that. Yeah, speaking of
Sure.
like writing a book, like what is the process behind that? I've always wondered too. Like what are the process, the ideas that how do you layer it down or anything like
Sure.
that?
Well, the first thing is I would say you have to come up with an idea, right?
Mhm.
You have to come up with an idea that has value, is unique, and is unique and is different, right? I think a lot of people have book ideas, but they've already been written, right? And so
Mhm.
I think that's the first thing. The second thing is I would make sure that you're writing about things you know. If you aren't, you've got a lot of work ahead of you, right? I mean, and writing a book is a huge endeavor to begin with. So the very first thing I will do is I will outline the book. I will create I won't start writing. I start by looking at who's my audience for this? What do they need? What do they want? Um, how will this book be different? Right. And I start putting together the purpose and reasoning for the book. Then I do a straw kind of set of content. I outline the book. What are the chapters? What are the core things in each of those chapters? What am I trying to get across? And then from there, I start working on the chapters. And I in this one, I built a structure for it. So every chapter starts with a quote, and then usually an introductory kind of story or an example, and then it dives into the content, and that content is then broken up with narratives. So you get to see how it plays out. You see real examples of people. So for instance, the book starts with the very first line of the book is something to the effect of, "She's going to quit and it's all your fault."
Mhm.
And that starts from there, right? And so to me, what I wanted to do is I wanted to use story as well as good content to pull people in and get people to see how it works. So it's not dry. And then I also pull in information from the people like Marshall Goldsmith, Ken Blanchard, Simon Sinek, and some other folks periodically, because they have things to say on the topics that we're talking about in the book. And so to me, I'm a big believer that the world's big, and that you can share credit, and that you should come together. And so I actually like to credit other people where I can. So
Wow, I always wondered too how, like I said, the process. So thank you for sharing that. And
yeah,
yeah, congratulations of writing a new book. That's
thank you very much.
amazing. Not a lot of people can say that. And yeah, I've had a great time speaking with you. I can tell you, obviously, you are very kind.
Thank you.
Especially with people and, having patience to, kind of speak with people and deal with different types of people. It takes a certain kind of patience. Yeah, but yeah, thank you so much for speaking with me. I appreciate it so much for you taking the time.
My pleasure. I enjoyed it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. I hope you have a great day, and we'll put all of your link in the like bio on YouTube, so your
Okay.
book and everything, and yeah, your Instagram or
Fantastic.
website. So yeah, okay, thank you so
Mhm.
much.
Thank you.
Bye.
All right.
Yeah,
Take care.
you too. Bye.
Bye.